Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to become a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Ken Eslick on the line. He's founder and president of the Leaders Lab. Ken, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Good to be back.
All right, Ken. So I'm excited to have you back. First of all, I know in our first episode we did quite a bit of a deep dive on your background, the Leaders Lab, of course, and just a whole lot of other topics. So I will make sure that we add the link to that in these show notes so that everyone that's interested can click on that and check out our previous episode as well. But before we get into today's topic, which is landing your dream job, so we're going to keep it very candidate centric. If today, if you're out there, you're looking and or thinking about what your next role is going to be, how to upskill. What should you be thinking about as a candidate? Higher pay, higher culture, like all these different things that we have. We have Ken on the line to answer for us. I'm curious what's going on in the job market. So Ken is our guy. But to get us started, we'll start this episode the way that we start them all, with our Mission Matters Minute. So Ken, we at Mission Matters, we amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's our mission. Ken, what mission matters to you?
Well, really, our mission when it comes to candidates is helping candidates find their dream job. And I know that's the title of this. I know that sounds kind of generic, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to cultural compatibility to be with a company long term. There's a lot of other things that we're going to talk about, but there's nothing that really fills us up more than we can take a up and coming leader and put them with a company where they're going to be for the next 10 or 20 years, and not only help that company grow, but help themselves and their families as well. So that is our mission when it comes to candidates.
Perfect. And I remember being a candidate myself. I remember a lot of things that were going through my heads, a lot of uncertainty versus decisions to be made. So excited to have you here to give us some insight. But, for those that didn't catch the previous work we've done together, maybe start a little bit with your background. Like, how'd you get started on this path to helping people with the Leaders Lab?
Sure. So I owned a company in my early 20s, I guess, into my early 30s, and I sold that to a big corporation, went to work for them. And really, I guess throughout my career, got put in leadership jobs, had great mentors above me. A real passion of mine, even though I was in sales and operations leadership, I was always responsible, as a lot of leaders are, for bringing in talent myself, and building my teams. And there was no one to really point fingers at if I was understaffed. I had to kind of make it happen. And so I was fortunate enough to, again, work with great companies or work for great companies, and had the ability to bring amazing people on board. And I think for anybody in your career, as you get into leadership, you're going to go as far as your hiring and development abilities. Your career will stop at some point, probably pretty early, if you're not good at finding and retaining and developing talent. And so I did find that was a strength of mine. I could see that in people. I could see maybe their hidden qualities, or things that they hadn't gotten an opportunity or been in the right environment to express. And I think, boy, you hire the right people, they can really make you look good, and they can take you and I were just talking about it pre-interview about what it's like when your team kind of falls into place, as it has for you at Mission Matters. And it's just night and day, and it's so fulfilling. And so as I decided to exit corporate America, I was like, well, what do I want to keep about, what did I like about corporate America? What filled me up, and where did I add value? And it was really in talent acquisition. I was like, why don't I just spend all my time doing that? And so really that started about 10 years ago. We focus on sales and operational leaders, particularly in business to business and business to consumer segments. But that's where we're at. So we serve both the candidate and client side, but we're going to focus today on the candidates.
Fantastic. And love bringing mission-based individuals on here. And speaking of candidates, so I guess just to open up this can of worms here, we're recording this just for context for everybody that's watching or listening to this. We're recording this in March of 2022. lots changing in the marketplace overall. So, pandemic, all the other things that have been happening last couple of years. So a lot of people changing jobs, different work scenarios possibly available, like work from remote, going back home or going back to work into the office. I mean, just a lot shaking up in the job market, period. A lot of different opportunities happening. So that being said, from your vantage point, I guess, what are some of let's just start maybe on the high level. What are some of the big themes that you're seeing?
Boy, that was a big question.
That's why I
I
said
like it.
themes. We're going to whittle it
Yeah,
down, but themes.
yeah. Um, one of the I'm gonna talk about it, I guess, kind of globally.
Mhm.
In that I don't believe that chaos will be the norm moving forward. Right? We're not always going to have supply chain deficits. We're not always going to have high single digit, maybe approaching 10% inflation. Those things won't last to me. Those things are temporary. Careers, career by nature is different than a job, right? And a career is long term. And I guess the theme that I'm seeing is I'm seeing people take a short term attitude towards a long term situation. Your career should be long term. But when the focus becomes money and only money, it's important. But when it becomes only money or primarily money, that is a short term solution to a long term situation. I saw a quote earlier. I'm going to pull it up. I'm looking away from you right now to pull it up. But this was from MIT Sloan Management Review. I just put this on LinkedIn for anyone that follows me. It says a toxic corporate culture is by far the strongest predictor of industry adjusted attrition and is 10 times more important than compensation in predicting turnover. And Brene
Wow.
Brown, if you follow her, she's a big thought leader. She posted that and I kind of reposted it. But yeah, it's just huge. So the theme that I'm seeing is people putting less value in culture, even though based on this study, it matters more than ever. It's why you're losing people. But the people that are leaving jobs, instead of, and I'm stereotyping, I get that,
Yeah.
but instead of focusing on the new job because they don't always know the new company, instead of qualifying the new job based on culture, they're qualifying it a lot of times based on pay and benefits first, which will never work. It's like going into a marriage where you're not culturally compatible. It's not going to work. It might work for a little bit, but it won't work long term.
Yeah, and just briefly, I mean, from the other side of the coin on this one too, like maybe some of these packages or some of these other things that may not be sustainable when you're trying to aggressively go after talent. Like, not only may it not work on the candidate side, but it may not work on the employer side long term as well, right?
Completely. I mean, so cultural compatibility is a two-way street. So if you get somebody, if you and I, if you were coming to work for me and I didn't have a vision to sell you, if I didn't have a culture that really appealed to you, even if it was just kind of okay, but it wasn't the selling point,
Yeah.
then as soon as you have something better, you're jumping ship, right? If the reason that I brought you into my company was money, the reason you'll leave is money, right? Because it was the only point of differentiation that I made in
Great
bringing
words
you
of
on board.
wisdom, Ken. Interview
Yeah,
done. Thank you. Mic
yeah,
drop.
yeah. I mean, it's really true though. And so, but if you qualify somebody based on character traits, longevity, skill set, cultural compatibility, those things. And I think sometimes when candidates look at this, they go, well, he's a recruiter trying to talk me into a lower salary. And it's like, no, I'm not. If you want to know how recruiters get paid, we get paid when you get paid more.
Exactly.
So I'm okay with you getting paid more. Trust me. I'm just not okay with that being the focal point of the change because it won't last. And then I'm out of integrity because I put you and our client in a position that's not going to be long lasting.
Yeah. And so taking it a step further, so for the candidates out there in today's market, like, including culture, as you've explained very clearly, like what are some of the other things that they should be maybe researching when they're thinking about this?
Again, I'm going to stay with culture just for a second, and then I'll
Go
jump
for
on
it.
it, because just within culture, I feel like there's what culture sounds like such a big word, right? It sounds like it's hard to get your hands around, but I think you can start writing down what is important in a culture to you, because
Mhm.
so many things that people talk about, even things like work-life balance, what is the company's position on working weekends? To me, that's part of their culture, right? Do they
Mhm.
value family time and things like that?
Mhm.
So I would really break down the culture,
Mhm.
and what's important to you, what matters to you. Clear performance reviews that are timely, knowing what's expected and where you stand at all
Mhm.
times, having a clear promotional track, even things like, some of the other things I'm going to mention that they should really be
Mhm.
focused on, like growth.
Yeah.
Growth to me becomes part of culture. It's a separate thing, but if you're with a company that's growing double digits, let's say you're with a company that's growing internally at 12%
Yeah.
versus one that's growing at 2%, and they could have the same mission matters, right? But
Yeah.
they could have the same mission, but completely different cultures based on that growth. Because if I'm growing at 2% and you have a
Mhm.
similar company growing at 12, then of course opportunities are going to be more abundant in your company.
Mhm.
That's going to affect the attitude of the people around there. People are probably going to be working harder, but with a better attitude, because they know that there's something, very clearly in their sights that they can aspire to.
Yeah.
So breaking it down, I guess I would look at culture for sure, all the things that come with it. I think growth, I'm going to stay with that now for a
Mhm.
second. So growth is so, so, so important, because without it, everything that the interviewer says
Yeah.
is, I want to use a swear word, but I won't. It's BS.
Yeah.
It's just BS. They could believe it themselves. They could say, here is your career path. Here's what's going to happen if
Mhm.
you do all this work. But if they're not growing, they're not going to magically create a position for you just because you're a good guy or a good girl,
Mhm.
right? Like, they absolutely have to be growing. And
Mhm.
so, at least for the type of candidates that we, are going after, because we're generally getting people that are still moving up in the leadership track, from, GM to director, director to VP, that kind of thing. They still
Mhm.
are interested in that. Now, that doesn't mean for everybody, right? For people
Mhm.
that aren't Leaders Lab candidates, cultural compatibility to you might be, it's a part-time job. It needs to fit your schedule. And I get that. So I'm kind of painting everybody as if they're a Leaders Lab candidate. But for our candidates that are up and coming, that need career growth, that need vision, then growth is absolutely, company growth is absolutely essential. And when I'm talking to candidates sometimes that have had good results in a bad growth company or a low growth
Mhm.
company, and a lot of times they'll go, well, yeah, but I've been getting promoted. I'm 30 years old and I'm already a director. And I'll
Yeah.
go, what could you have done if you were at a 15, 20% internal growth company instead of a 3% internal
Mm.
growth company? Like, you
Right.
don't know what the other side looks like because you haven't been there. And it's a testament to them in a good way, obviously, that they've been able to have the success they've had in a low growth company. But growth is I know I'm hammering the heck out of it, but it's just so important. And I talk to people all the time that have no idea what the numbers are behind their current
Mhm.
company, let alone the company they're interviewing with. They just sort of get the job and go do the job, and they don't really worry about the financials of the
Totally.
company.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
was gonna ask is how do you find
yeah.
this information out? Like, how do you find out, like,
Google,
it's yeah.
like everything else in this world, Google, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that to be flippant at
Yeah.
all, but you can literally go to Google Finance, Yahoo Finance. I don't even know if they're. I don't use Google Finance, but I've used Yahoo Finance, CNBC, any of these free websites, and just type in the company's name, get their ticker symbol, and just
Mhm.
start looking at it. Just start looking at the company, looking at. There'll be press releases. I
Mhm.
read a book a long time ago that said if you want to know when a CEO is about to get replaced, is just read all the headlines below their stock. You
Yeah.
know, because if the majority of it's bad, something bad will happen to that CEO relatively soon, and it's true. So
Mhm.
if you're reading stories that say company misses earning expectations again, Production halted. Look at Peloton. Like this has happened recently. I love Peloton. I've got one sitting over here on my
I love
left side.
Peloton too, by the way. Best Facebook group community ever. Go ahead.
It's awesome, but I don't know if you followed the stock though. I
Mm,
bought their stock in the
yeah.
early days of the pandemic. It was trading for I think around $30 at the time. It shot all the way up to north of $150
Mhm.
based on everybody buying bikes during the pandemic. I think there was some mismanagement in the company. You started, I'm just going back to this headlines thing, and I'm using Peloton as an example
Yeah.
for any company you could look at. But the headlines start reading, first you start seeing discounts on the bike, supply
Mhm.
chain problems, uh, lack of conversion in free users. They gave people free trials of the app
Mhm.
during the pandemic, but they weren't converting them to bikes at a rate that they or treadmills at a rate that they thought they would. So again, you just start reading these stories that stack and stack and stack. So if I was going to work for that company, I would absolutely proceed with a lot of caution, right? I don't think they're
Mhm.
hiring anyone right now. It's gotten that bad. But you can read other headlines. Just are they making their quarterly earnings? What are those earnings? What is their growth rate? You can get all of that information very easily. I mean, I look at a lot of candidates for a fraction of the time you spend playing fantasy football. If you're into that, you can figure out everything you need to know about your company when it comes to their finances. And if you get the job there, you can impress the people above you with that knowledge. And you'll also know how to better navigate your company because of that knowledge.
No, it's great. And then for and I guess the thought process here, so the two pillars that you mentioned, culture and growth, like those are
Yeah.
two of the big ones. Are there any others that people should be considering?
Well, so I said, like, let's not put it right at the top of the list, but I
Yeah.
do think that benefits compensation, of course, is very important.
Hmm.
I think getting clarity on that. If you're working with a recruiter, I guess actually, if you're working with a recruiter or not, either way, those compensation questions,
Hmm.
they're probably going to ask you early on, like your recruiter. What I ask everybody right away, and it's more, where do you need to be to consider this, just to make
Hmm.
sure it's a match. We're not going to get into details on a first call.
Yeah.
But I guess my point for bringing it up is candidates should really avoid um, personal benefit questions too early in an interview process. In other
Mm.
words, if you and I are, and I always use the romance part of this because it does kind of work that way. It's like we're going to date, right? That's the
Yeah.
interview process to see if we want to get married. Well, imagine going on a first date and asking what could be the love of your life, all questions about what she's going to do for you, Adam. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm kind of interested in you, but can you bring home 100 grand? And are you good? Are you gonna be a good mother? And like,
Yeah.
that's not. Instead of going, here's what I bring to the table, right?
Hmm.
So I think as a candidate, you're trying to get people who are emotional creatures, just like we are in our relationships, to buy into you. So everything at the beginning should be about you figuring out how to make sure that they want you as a candidate. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so all the questions are around that. So, what do your top
Hmm.
performers do? How can I emulate your top performers and all of
Hmm.
that? And don't get me wrong, all those other questions are important. They're just important in time
Hmm.
once you've sold yourself.
Let's go a little bit further on the benefits and compensation kind of thought process. So pros and cons, high salary versus not salary, not high salary, and culture trade-off. I think your stance, I think you made it pretty clear, like culture and growth and some of these other indicators versus high pay alone, like one trumps the other. Am I off?
Yeah, well, I mean, for sure, culture is the bigger one, but there's the
Mhm.
reality that you don't want to leave your job and take a pay cut,
Yeah,
right?
of
You
course.
gotta. For most people, they need to
Mhm.
make sure it's lateral. Sometimes there's reasons to take a step back if you're switching industries from a high-paying job and your value is in that industry.
Mhm.
Then sometimes you got to take a little bit of a haircut. But
Mhm.
obviously, none of us want that to happen. And again, as recruiters,
Mhm.
we don't want that to happen either. But sometimes it does.
Yeah.
Um, Culture first, then pay and benefits.
Mhm.
So you got to make sure it's the right fit for you. Now, I do think there's qualifying questions again right away,
Mhm.
not in the weeds of compensation and benefits, but in the ballpark, right? Like, is
Mhm.
this job going to be in the ballpark? Should I fall in love with the culture,
Yeah.
right? but then value the culture, value the people that are managing you. Is your direct boss going to be somebody that you see not only having the skill set to lead you to the next
Mhm.
level, but having the clout within the organization to help you rise to the next level? That's very important. So I think focusing on that, I think, but once all those boxes are checked, then I think there's a way to bridge the compensation, and you're never going to push a company completely out of their comfort zone, but there
Mhm.
is a way to test the higher end of it. The challenge, and this is where I think, and I'm obviously biased, but I think very logically so, working with a
Mhm.
recruiter really helps, because it's the same reason athletes have agents.
For
Like,
sure.
yeah, you don't
Mhm.
want to be the one arguing with the team owner,
Yeah.
about your salary and all of that. You don't want those hard feelings. You let your agent kind of handle it. And I think the recruiter should know the positions that they're working with well enough to know what is the salary range, where do you
Mhm.
fit within it, is your resume strong enough to push
Mhm.
to the higher side of that, and then let them do that for you, so that you don't have to start again your relationship in an adversarial, or in a way where you were going through some kind of bitter salary
Mhm.
negotiation, right before you start. I mean, I think I'd rather just start and be happy and smiling from day one. And then my last point on that would be, and I could say the same thing on the client side, but
Mhm.
if everything fits, sometimes people get so hung up on something very small. Like, I'll see
Mhm.
a candidate hypothetically that makes an $80,000 base right now,
Mhm.
and only gets say a $10,000 bonus, so they're at $90,000 all in, right?
Mhm.
And the new job will pay a $75,000 base, but a $25,000 bonus, and it's a better company, and it fits them in every way. So their
Yeah.
overall package is 100 versus their old, current package is 90,
Mhm.
but the base went down 5 grand. And
Mhm.
I've dealt with people all the time that will say, I'm not moving if my base goes down 10 cents. And I'll go, but it's just a base salary. It's just a
Yeah.
random number of many numbers. And so I would say, like, look at the whole package,
Mhm.
because it's not always apples to apples. You got to include everything, including the culture, the career growth, where you're going to be in a
Mhm.
year, 3 years, 5 years, bonus, benefits, car packages, all those kinds of things have to be factored in.
And so not to give away your secret sauce or anything, but just
Yeah.
like you said, an agent would negotiate on the behalf of their athlete client. Like
Yeah.
any strategies that you use or you care to share, when it comes to
Sure.
negotiating, pay and benefits.
Absolutely. The number one thing, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Adam, as a business owner. Have you ever had an employee, or a former employee hold a gun to your head when it came to compensation or anything? Have you ever had that happen where they're just like, I need this or I'm leaving? Have you ever had that approach?
Always. I probably have that right now. I haven't checked my email today.
So that doesn't work. Um,
Yeah.
if you pick a fight with someone, what are they
Mhm.
going to do? Typically, they're going to fight
Mhm.
back, probably.
Yeah.
So a good approach is never I need or else.
Mhm.
You can say I need or else without saying that. You can do it in a very diplomatic, in a very business like professional way. So
Mhm.
I think when it comes to it, whether you're using us, so my negotiation on your behalf would be, look, here's your range. Adam comes to the table with this many years experience, this salary history, this educational level, this
Mhm.
level of performance. By the way, I would have already done it before they even started falling in love with you, right? I would have
Mhm.
done it right at the beginning. Like, Adam's a great candidate. If you end up liking him, you're going to need to be on the high side of what you're comfortable with, or
Mhm.
maybe even higher than you're comfortable with. So I
Mhm.
already kind of set the stage. That's my job
So it's
as a
not a
candidate.
surprise then versus kind of go at it your own and they have one thing in their head and then maybe when it gets further along, it's like, oh, wait a minute, we weren't thinking that. Like it's not a
Exactly.
surprise. Like if they want to and if they fall in love with you, the candidate, so to speak, they're kind of already expecting that.
Exactly, exactly. Now, but we also have to do the same thing with candidates. If a
Of course.
candidate's expectations are beyond what the client's going to pay,
Mhm.
I tell them right out of the gates, like, this. I've placed 100 people in this job or whatever it is, and this is
Yeah.
the most I've seen. So set your sights straight.
Mhm.
But my approach, which I think the candidate could also have the same approach if they weren't represented by a recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is the candidate, again, should not be talking about this early in the process. As a candidate, you can't walk in and go, hey, by the way, I know I'm a new candidate. In the event that you love me, I'm going to be really expensive, right? Like you can't say that.
I mean,
So,
it's
but I
an
can,
approach you can, whether or not it'll work, I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. I don't think it would be effective, but I can do that on your behalf,
Yeah.
right? I can say that on your behalf because that's not you bragging about yourself in advance. That's
Yeah.
me saying, I know this guy and this is why you want him and how much you want to pay.
Mm-hmm.
So as a candidate, though, let's say it's the end of the process,
Yeah.
they make you an offer, you're not represented by a recruiter. The way I would handle it is the same way I handle it as a recruiter is thank you very much. I'd point out all the reasons I want to join the company. You know, the cultural compatibility, the impact I think I can make on the team. I'm so impressed with your outstanding growth record, you know, da 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 da. First of all, I'd say, let me take a minute and think about it, talk to my family, wife, whoever it is, husband, significant other, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it doesn't match up, if you really are going to need more and it's within reason, you think they might be able to do it, then the approach should always be, I want to do this. I really want to do this. Here's where I'm stuck. And just explain your situation. Here was my old take home. Let's go back to that base salary thing I just had. Maybe there's a good reason your base can't go down by $5,000 because maybe even though the bonus in the new job is better, if it's only paid annually, your actual month to month income goes down. And if you don't have an extra $500 every month or whatever the difference is, that's a problem, right? And that's okay if you just say like, this is my situation. Maybe if you guys could prorate the bonus, maybe you could guarantee part of it. Maybe you give me more base and less bonus. Like, I don't know. Like, I want to make it work. I want to work here. If you come at it with that approach, people are going to do everything they can to get you on the team.
It's
As long as
collaborative
you're
at
being
that point. It's
reasonable.
more of a collaborative, like we're on the same side of the table feel versus like opposition.
Exactly, which is exactly the relationship you're getting into, right? Your relationship isn't predicated completely on salary. It's based on being able to work together, being able to have tough exchanges. So not only will you give yourself the best opportunity to make the most amount of money, but you're also going to show your boss or somebody in your chain of command what you're like when under pressure and what you're like to work with, because the way that you just dealt with them and the professionalism that you showed while still probably getting the outcome or at least part of the outcome that you wanted showed diplomacy, showed negotiation skills, showed a willingness to work together, showed business maturity, showed all of these things that frankly will impress them even if they don't give you everything you're asking for.
No, well said. And I'm just kind of putting myself mentally into that situation versus the other of the opposition side. One doesn't work. One has the ability to move the deal forward. I mean, a lot of people watching this, they're in business. They've been in sales at some point in their life. Like one feels better. One's a consultative approach. One is an approach towards a shared objective versus just, kind of two people on two sides of the table that are kind of stuck on a point that can't move forward. So the whole idea is like, how do you move this forward? It's awesome.
And that's it. That's all it really is. It's not pay can feel really emotional, right? Because we equate it with like personal value or like, this is all they value me for or whatever. And it's like, look, it's just a number. They based it on your salary history. They based it on what was in their budget. They based it on a bunch of different things. And sometimes they get it wrong. It's not personal. Sometimes they just get it wrong. And they're going to be able to do it or they're not going to be able to do it. It's not a big deal. I'll tell you one last story about this like gun to the head approach. I had a guy that was working for me when I was in corporate America that every single time I'm not kidding, for like the last month or two that I worked with him, every time I talked to him, he was a performer.
Yeah.
But he was not culturally compatible, but he was a performer, which is a challenge, right? Because we're all like,
challenge.
Yeah, especially when they're driving numbers, right? So driving sales. So this person was just, every time I saw him, I need a raise, I need a raise, I need a raise. And we had really taken good care of this person. And finally, I remember this specifically because it had snowed at my house and I was snowed in and I was without power, but I had cell service. And he
Mm.
was really leaning on me. By that point, I already told him, like, you're not getting a raise. We can talk about it at the beginning of the fiscal year and all of that.
Mhm.
He said, well, I'm going to come up and see you. And I was like, I'm snowed into my house. Like, I don't really need to deal. And he did. I said, I'll tell you what, it was on a Friday. I said, I'll come down and see you Monday. Don't come up. I'll come down and see you. And I made a decision right there that our relationship had become completely 100% transactional. All it
Mm.
was about for him anymore was the money. He couldn't see how
Mhm.
we had taken care of him. There was
Yeah.
nothing else that mattered. And so our meeting Monday was not about trying to find a way. I had already been trying to do that. It
Mhm.
was getting to work before him so I could have a locksmith come in, change the locks to the
Mm.
building, and give him his exit papers. Because if
Mm.
you put someone in a position where you're forcing their hand and it feels forced, then you run the risk of taking everything off the table. So if that's a job offer, the job offer goes away instead of it
Yeah.
being collaborative. Or
Mhm.
if you're an existing employee, it takes the promotion or raise away.
So I want to change it up a bit here. So I
Sure.
know we know at Leaders Lab you're working with both candidates and employers, but I want to take a moment and just have you kind of tell us directly what you do, the types of maybe clients you work with, and let's start there.
Sure. So we're primarily with business to business route based companies,
Mm.
meaning the company I used to work for is called Cintas, amazing company, one of the best companies in the country, not just because I
Mhm.
say so, but like Forbes magazine and Fortune and all
Yeah.
these other write ups that they've had throughout the years. Really dynamic stock growth.
Mhm.
When I left there in 2012, their shares were around $40 a share. And even with the
Mhm.
recent battering that the stock market has taken, they're at around 370 now. So we're talking about
Mm.
like 900% stock growth in 10 years. It's like pretty crazy numbers. So that's where I got all of my training from. And they're a uh, kind of best in class type company when it comes to hiring and developing people. So I got really good training there. And so we'll work with similar companies. So they're in like the uniform business, first aid
Mhm.
and safety supplies, fire protection equipment, anything that has a B2B recurring
Mhm.
services based aspect where a delivery or service person will show up at your place of business. So if
Mhm.
you think about like minded companies or services, it could be companies like, that do recycling. It could be companies that do document management, document shredding, coffee vendors, um,
Mhm.
heating and air conditioning companies. You know what I mean? Like anybody that's
Yeah.
got like a fleet of vehicles out there where they're responsible for servicing and sales and have those different components. That's really
Mhm.
our expertise. Now, we'll focus on C suite and VPs and all of that, but
Mhm.
because those positions aren't open all the time, I would say our sweet spot is probably in the GM
Mhm.
and service or district manager as well as sales manager kind of
Mhm.
realm. And that's where we do the majority of our stuff. But we're not opposed as long as it's within those industries to work
Mhm.
on other things. We've done HR placements, finance, because again, we understand
Mhm.
those industries so well. Those profit and loss statements from company to company are not that much different. Like I can look at one and apply it to the other pretty simple.
Mhm. From the candidate side of things, like what do you find is a good candidate to work with you and your team, whether it's cultural fit, expectations, industry, like what just makes a good candidate fit?
I think for us, I mentioned this earlier in a
Mhm.
different way, but in an answer where I'm looking for leaders that are growing, regardless of
Mhm.
their age right now, right? So it's not always a 25-year-old. It might be older, but they're growing or they
Yeah.
want to grow, right? They've got
Mhm.
additional steps to take.
Mhm.
So candidates to me are hungry. They're in student mode.
Mhm.
They want to move up. They've got some flexibility around
Mhm.
potentially relocation, even if that's within their market.
Yeah.
Um, they don't always have to have that, but when they do, it's a plus. It opens up more opportunities for them. I find that the best leaders, regardless of our candidates or not, I find that the best leaders are also the best followers. Sometimes, if that makes sense, like
Mhm.
like they're the best students, I should say, instead of the best followers. But they're always learning,
Mm.
and so I really look for that when I'm interviewing people. I remember this happened more than once, but
Mhm.
a typical question when people are interviewing somebody is, you're always saying, tell me about a time when, and it's, you hit this goal, you made this happen or
Yeah.
whatever. And then immediately after getting people to brag about themselves for, 3 or 4 big KPIs that they hit or whatever, I usually say, okay, tell me about the last thing that you failed at.
Mhm.
And it's so funny because a lot of times there's just dead silence at that point. And I've gone like, I'll wait. And I've even like prompted it, like done kind of the like, look, I make mistakes every day. It's, you're not
Mhm.
going to hurt yourself with me. I'm just kind of curious, anything popping in your head. I've literally had people go like, I just can't think of anything. Like I can't think of a time where I haven't met a goal. I can't think of a time where, and what that tells me is either they're really, really nervous for the interview and just can't
Mhm.
think, or worse, would be they're not in student mode. They can't see. They've got a blind spot
Mhm.
on on their weaknesses, and that
Mm.
is a big problem. Like someone could come to the table with the absolute best skill set,
Mhm.
but if they've got a blind spot on their weakness and they're not in student mode,
Mhm.
then you're getting them at their peak. And I don't
Mm.
care if they're 25, 35,
Mhm.
55. If you're not growing,
Mhm.
you're dying, right? And I don't want to bring someone on that's at their peak, because that's not going to be fun for them. It's not going to be fun for my client. Ultimately, it won't be fun for me either. So I really, really, really look for people that are growers, that are just passionately curious about new things and how to do things. And you can tell right away because they'll start asking questions. I feel like the best candidates ask a lot of questions about the other best candidates or about the best employees, you
Mm.
know, which is that's what I would ask if I was going to a new place. I'd just be like, if a company hired me as a senior VP right now and
Mhm.
said, come on in, here's what we need you to take over. I'd be like, all right, what are the top VPs in that company? What are they doing? How are they doing it? Who are my top 5 out of the 20 that are in that role or whatever?
Mhm.
And what can I sort of shamelessly steal from them and then improve on to make it better? And so our candidates will ask the same thing. What do you see? What are the top 3 qualities that you see from people in this position? People that are concerned about performing will ask the complete opposite question. What do
Mm.
you think that question is, Adam? Like what's the opposite of the performance questions?
It'd be something like, what are if it's not what's expected of me? I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What's
No,
expected
no,
of me
what's
would probably be
what's
it.
the minimum? What's the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
minimum? I'm like,
exactly.
never say that. Hey, what's the least I have to
Yeah.
do for you to not fire me? I'm like, like, I mean, I know they don't
Another
say it
way of
like that, but
wording it, but yes.
that's how it comes across. So they'll
It
go,
does come
what
across
is
that way. Mhm.
and I'll say, are you asking about the expectation or are you asking about the goal?
Yeah.
Right? If they reframe it and go, no, I want to know like what it takes to be the best. Oh, okay, great. But if
Mm.
it's just sort of like, no, I just want to know what I need to do to get by,
Mhm.
they're out. I mean, even with me as a recruiter, I'm not. I'm done. I'm essentially done with the interview at that point. I may stay on the phone a little bit longer just to make it look good, but I'm done. I'm mentally checked out at that point. So our
Mm.
clients definitely would be.
It's awesome. So, Ken, just have to say it's been great having you back on the show. I'm gonna have to bring you back on the show again because we spent a lot of times today talking from the candidate's point of view. I know you work with
Sure.
many, many employers out there, so I think we're gonna need to do another episode together and spend some time and kind of flip the switch here
Yeah,
and talk from the employer side. So, love to have you back, of course. But that being
definitely.
said, if somebody is watching this and they want to learn more about Leaders Lab, they wanna connect, whether again candidate or employer. What's the best way for them to reach out and to connect?
Yes, you can always just email me if you want to, ken at theleaderslab.co. It's .com was taken and they wanted like $40,000 for it. So I got .co. But also me and all of my entire team are super active on LinkedIn. Like we're in there every single day. So you can find me on LinkedIn. My name's right here. I'm the only one. We're the only Leaders Lab. You can find us
Mhm,
pretty easily. Connect with me there. Say that you saw me on
mhm,
Adam's podcast, and I'll definitely accept. And yeah, and then we're happy to jump on a Zoom call,
mhm,
talk with you as a candidate or as a client, and we
mhm.
can take it from there.
Perfect. And to the audience watching this, we'll of course put this all that information in the show notes, so you could just click on the link and head right on over and check out the Leaders Lab. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters or engaging with the platform, We're all about bringing on business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, mission-based individuals onto the show and having them share why they do what they do, like what excites them about going out into the marketplace and making a difference. If that's the type of content that you're into, or if that sounds interesting, we definitely welcome you to hit that subscribe button, because we have many more mission-based individuals on the line and coming up next, and we don't want you to miss a thing. And Ken, really, it's been a pleasure having you back on the show. Can't wait to bring you back for another, because I want to hear from the employer's standpoint and side of things as well, all your knowledge on that. So again, thank you for coming back on the show.
Yeah, I'll see you in a few months. Thank you, Adam.